As our audience knows, Larry, over the years, you and I have these very energetic back and forths, a little bit of rough and tumble, and a few jokes along the way. And I think we have to get the tone right this morning. This is a really tough time. And it's a tough time as a policymaker as well. There is a cost to keeping this economy locked down. There's a cost to opening it too. And Larry, I'd really love your perspective in this moment, how difficult it is to calibrate the right policy response in a moment like this.
Well, I just want to say on that, your earlier point, look, this is a tough time, but it's a tough time for everybody in America. There's no question about that. Wherever you work or don't work, it's a tough time. This jobs report today is full of heartbreak. It's full of hardship. I believe that it will prove to be temporary because I think the pandemic contraction or the contraction in the economy caused by the pandemic, COVID-19, will prove to be temporary, and that we are actually coming down the home stretch in terms of reopening the economy. But it's a rough number. There's no question about that. Some of this looks to be temporary layoffs, maybe about 3/4 of it, but that still doesn't necessarily make it any better. People expect to return to jobs. Let's hope that they can return to jobs. Look, we have done President Trump's leadership, Vice President Pence, we put together enormous rescue package, cash, liquidity, Federal Reserve, payroll protection. It's a remarkable thing. I was actually adding it up. It's about $9 trillion now, including the Federal Reserve and what we've done on fiscal policy in the budget. Some of this may have worked. We may have cushioned the decline. That may be part of the story inside these very, very difficult numbers. So we will see how this works, and we will see whether we have to go back. Let's talk about presidential policies in a few moments, because I do believe the second half of this year, according to the CBO and private forecasters, the second half is going to have very significant bounce back in economic growth, and that will head into 2021, which could be a fantastic economic recovery year.
We all hope for that, Larry, and I know there's going to be an extra push in Washington to try and see that vision come to life and materialize. There's been a huge collective effort down in Washington, not just the administration. You've worked really well with Democrats as well. The Fed has done its part. I'm trying to understand how the policy effort evolves. Quite clearly, when we're shut down, you don't stimulate the economy, you offer aid. When we reopen, that's the time to stimulate. How do you see the policy effort changing in the months to come, adapting, Larry?
Well, I'm not here to negotiate, but I will simply say this. President Trump has had a set of policies that worked very well before this pandemic, the first 3 years plus, and indeed, in January and February, the economy was growing at 3% or better. I think that he wants to extend a lot of the ideas. He wants this to be a free enterprise economy. He wants to reward people for their success and their initiative and their efforts. As you know, he has talked about from time to time, talked or tweeted about payroll tax holidays. He's talked about capital gains taxes. He's talked about tourism, restaurants, traveling deductions that might work. We've talked about capital business expensing. For example, there are going to be a lot of COVID-related adjustments, whether you're a large factory in Detroit or whether you're a small restaurant in a small town in the heartland. All of that, if you ask me, safety first here as we reopen, all of that, every nickel of that should be completely expensed, 100% deduction, so people won't have to pay extra for that and open the door. We've talked about fair trade agreements. We will continue. We've talked about onshoring. We will continue that. I think a lot of people have learned we probably went way too far in our offshoring of factories and either manufacturing or pharmaceuticals. President Trump has talked about making it much easier to come back home to America. So that's a smattering of the policy ideas that he has put out there. We haven't begun to negotiate with the Hill. That will come in due course. We've had a bit of a pause. We're going to take a look at how the situation is. May is a reopening month, Jonathan. It'll spill over into June in phases. We've seen the federal guidelines have come down. Now the states are doing the same. We had Governor Abbott of Texas yesterday. I've been in a lot of meetings with the president and the governors. All that's moving ahead in phases. That's a big plus for the economy. We have to open safely and then get people back to work. And I think the temporary layoffs show that they will go back to work. And then we have to move ahead and make sure that the incentive structure of this economy remains intact so we can have the blue-collar boom that we had, so we can have the entrepreneurship, so we can have the fair trade and the energy independence. These are Trumpian themes, and I think that's where the president's going to move.
I know you want to talk about trade, Larry. I'm going to get to that in just a second. When it comes to reopening, I want to understand, and I know you're an optimistic man, whether you've done any contingency planning for a second wave and another shutdown. Are you doing that contingency planning now?
Yes, we are, as a matter of fact. It's a subject that comes up. I'm not going to go into detail. It's outside my lane. I have talked to Ambassador Birx on that, Dr. Fauci, and Vice President Trump's terrific team that he's assembled. I will tell you this without naming names, but one of the senior people on that group, I asked that person, what happens, right now the virus numbers are flattening out. That is a really good thing. That means we can reopen this economy. So I asked this person, what happens if you get a jump back up in the virus numbers? And the response was simply, look, we won't have to re-shut down because, first of all, we know more, we have more experience, and second of all, we are much better equipped with the right tools. I mean, President Trump deserves some credit for putting together a massive infrastructure, whether it's testing or face masks or gowns or whatever, running the whole gamut. So I don't want to dwell on the worst case because I am an optimist. I think that the governors and the mayors are very well aware of the safety needs as we reopen. But when we do reopen, that is going to give this economy a tremendous boost. And we will see that in the summer and autumn quarters and spilling into 2021. 2021 could be a fabulous year if we keep the right policies in place.
Larry, I hope that's the case. I truly do. I know you want to talk about trade, and we've only got a few minutes left, so let me give you the opportunity to do so. When it comes to the administration's trade stance, you just mentioned supply chain repatriation. Will you actively be looking to provide aid to companies that repatriate their supply chains?
Yes, I think we will do it by creating incentives. It's not a matter of punishing, it's a matter of incentivizing. I don't want to go into details, but onshoring is a very important theme. Come back to America. I think we've learned too much emphasis on supply chains overseas. Too much emphasis is not safe and not reliable and not good business practices. Again, I don't want to unveil or get ahead of our own policy process, but the president is very keen on onshoring. There are many ways to do that.
Are you rethinking again your relationship with the Chinese Communist Party?
Well, I don't think we ever stopped thinking about it, but all I'll say is this. First of all, as you know from reports today, Ambassador Lighthizer, Secretary Mnuchin met with Vice Premier Liu He of China. It was a very constructive meeting. The printout, the communique, if you will, was very positive. China continues to tell us that they have every intention of meeting the requirements and the implementations of the deal that was signed formally last winter. Seems like 1,000 years ago, but it was actually only a couple of months ago. They're a little bit behind on commodity purchases. That may be a function, of course, of market and economic conditions. But Liu He said they are pledged to continue, including, I might add, remedies for intellectual property theft and related measures. So those talks seem to go well and were constructive. However, the Chinese relationship is very complex. And we know that the virus originated in China. We are investigating, we, the U.S. government, the intelligence agencies, National Security Council, State Department, etc., are carefully investigating what happened and what didn't happen, what may have happened and what actually happened. China has been not transparent. A lot of people are concerned. I saw this with the president at the G7 video teleconference meeting a couple of weeks ago, and the other world leaders felt the same way. They will be held accountable, Jonathan. They will be held accountable. when the final studies are in. All I can say this morning is the trade relationship, and it's going to be a pretty good deal. A lot of exports going to come out of that when the economies recover. The trade relationship appears to be on track.
Sounds like a lot of talk, Larry. I've heard a lot of talk over the last week about this, about holding China accountable. Can we talk about accountability? How does the United States hold China accountable? By doing what?
Jonathan, I don't want to disappoint you or create otherwise emotional upset, but I'm not going into details about that. This is national security stuff, and we'll just have to leave it at that.
I understand that. It's a really delicate topic, but to round things out, quite clearly, the United States, and other countries for that matter as well, do not trust the Chinese Communist Party. So I'm not sure how much weight we should put on a statement released by USTR overnight about working towards this Phase 1 agreement, because quite clearly the United States is looking to hold China accountable. How can I reconcile those two things? Two countries working on a Phase 1 trade deal, two countries that don't trust each other, and one country that wants to punish the other.
Without accepting your premises there, you put out quite a lot. I don't want to go there. I will just say the relationship with China is always a complex relationship. It covers trade. It covers other economic matters. It covers national security matters. It covers espionage matters. It covers cyber security matters, or the lack thereof. It covers onshoring and offshoring matters. It's always a very complex relationship. Problems in one end doesn't necessarily mean everything stops. But President Trump has said any number of times that they will be held accountable. We continue to investigate the problems regarding the coronavirus and the lack of transparency. We're trying to get to the bottom of what actually happened in China. Those efforts are ongoing, and I believe the president in the Oval Office yesterday said in the next couple of weeks we'll probably have a lot more information to share.